NEC Football Media Week continues as we dig in with the Stonehill Skyhawks, and today we're joined by their 11th year, 10th season head coach, Eli Gardner. Coach, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks, Craig. Pleasure to be here.
Before we look forward, let's kind of refresh and take a look back at last year. Last year, Stonehill started 2-3, 1-0 in conference play in the first 5 games. 2 of the first 3 losses were by 1 score, had a big conference win over LIU, but then lost 5 of the next 6 before winning the finale against St. Francis. Finished 4-8 overall, 3-4 in league play, which was an improvement from the season before. So, Coach, how would you kind of assess all the ups and the downs that the program had in the 2025 season?
Yeah, I think when we look back at the 2025, obviously we had a really tough 2024. I think that we made bigger strides in 2025 than our record really indicates. You kind of pointed it out, Craig. Like we lost, by my count, we lost 4 games throughout the season by 1 score or less. Some conference games, some out of conference games. Obviously, we had a big out of conference win against the CAA opponent in Maine up at their place on a Saturday night. So that was a big victory for us. But yeah, I think, part of us having to turn the corner here is finding ways to win those close football games. And there's so much parity within the league. So every weekend is going to be a hard fought football game against 2 very similar, opponents. So it's really important for us to, find ways to win those close football games. I thought we did a great job. Defensively, we really improved from last season to 2025. And, I think when we played well, we played behind our defense and we were able to get a lot of stops, create some turnovers, some momentum plays, and really just did a great job of keeping our opponents off the scoreboard for the most part. Offensively, I think we were inconsistent at times, but, I think our highs were really high. And, obviously, we're trying to be more consistent in terms of moving the football, scoring the football. We did a great job from a turnover differential standpoint last season in 2025. That was a big point of emphasis for us going into the year. Our quarterback Jack O'Connell did a great job of not turning the ball over, and we protected it on offense. So that was huge, and that's something that we need to continue to ride. So I think there's a lot of close football games. I think we took huge steps forward. We gained a lot of confidence in ourselves. We refined our process quite a bit because obviously coming out of a tough 2024, we wanted to make sure that we evaluated everything, and we changed how we practiced and how we scheduled things, and just the day to day for our guys. And I think it paid huge dividends. So we're just looking to throw more gas on that fire here going into 2026.
You kind of touched on the offense, so let's kind of start there. Last year, this was an offense that was last in the NEC, only 252 yards per game, next to last in scoring, only 15 points. You talked about building a little bit more consistency this year. So what are the plans to maybe take another step forward in 2026 on the offensive side of the football?
Yeah, I think we did a good job of our quarterback played really strong last season given some of the circumstances. There's definitely some plays that he got us out of, in terms of, when we're getting pressure and making things happen with his legs. And he just did a great job of not turning the football over at a high level. So, I think really playing around and behind Jack when, he's obviously back for his 5th year as a grad student this year. So, we're excited for him. He's a captain for us this fall. And he's just done a great job of, taking more ownership of the offense. Last year, we had a new offensive coordinator, a new scheme. He got here in spring. So, after coming out of year 1, going into year 2 in the system, we feel really excited for him and the guys around him. I think, big point of emphasis for us has to be playing better up front and running the ball better. We kind of had some different faces in the backfield playing running back. We had a couple guys that we're really excited about. One, he was a true freshman for us last year, Aiden Garrett. He only played in 4 games, but he really made a significant impact in those 4 games and showed us, what he can do at a high level. So, he'll be a redshirt freshman this fall, and we're excited to get him a lot of touches. And then behind him, we have, quite a few guys that had success last year. Josh Roberson did a good job in 3 or 4 games, rushed for over 100 yards in the last game of the year against St. Francis, had some explosive plays. And then a couple of newcomers that, didn't get a lot of touches last year. So we're excited, I think, about the overall depth in the running back room. We have a lot of experience coming back up front on the O line. That's going to be led by our center and our captain, Josh Troiano. He arguably was our best offensive player all around last year. And so he's captain. He's a senior this year. He's done a great job of taking that next step in his own development, but also in terms of like the culture in that room as well. So we have a lot of great depth coming up behind him. We have some exciting guys that didn't play a lot last year, but have developed a ton. Some freshmen that just weren't ready, but now going into their sophomore year, we're expecting some production out of them. So, and then I think we did a good job in the wideout room. I think you're going to see it's going to be really competitive to see who gets on the bus in some of these away games because we feel like we have 11 or 12 wide receivers that can play Division I college football. Obviously, the big thing is making sure we have guys that can make a big impact and can be our trusted guys, game in and game out. The big returners there are going to be Elijah Turner, who played a lot for us as a freshman in the slot last year, and then Torrance Washington, who played primarily on the outside but also played in the slot. With both those guys coming back in another year in the system. And then we brought in some transfers around them that can make a big impact. There's a couple guys that really popped off in the spring, Jalen Baker and Antion Neal, who are definitely going to be, stalwarts in that receiver room. So I think we have, just more total talent around and not just like one guy, but we have multiple guys that can make plays for us on offense this year. And our big thing is like, we've got to move the ball more consistently and we got to score the ball more consistently. And we know that. And our guys know that. And, obviously we set the bar pretty low last year. So we're excited to be much improved this year in 2026.
You touched on Jack. He started every game last year, limited the turnovers, only 6 interceptions, threw for over 1,800 yards. He was named a team captain this year. So how important will it be for him, for his teammates to have his leadership and his experience there as your QB1?
Yeah, it's probably one of the most important things that we have going for us this coming season. And it's not just Jack, obviously, and we have 3 other captains, but obviously when some of your best leaders are your best players, and obviously as a quarterback, you have the ball in your hands every play. I kind of joke with Jack, the 2 most visible people in our program right now are me and you. And if we win, you're going to get all the credit. And if we lose, I'm going to get all the blame. So, it's important that he and I have a great relationship, but he and his teammates have a great relationship. And I think that's where he's really taken that next step as a leader, as he's invested in his teammates, whether they're a freshman transfer, they've been here for a semester, they've been here for 4 years playing with him. He's gone out, above and beyond off the field to build those relationships with his teammates, and they love him. They trust him. He's a fiery competitor, and he's got a lot of like fire in his belly on game day, and that is something I think the guys rally around, and they see that and they want to play well for him and with him. So that's a huge piece of our success for this upcoming year. Not only his performance, but his leadership, not just on offense, but as an entire team.
One of the things that a lot of your fellow coaches have talked about this week, your media week, has been offensive line, defensive line. In today's day and age, the most important parts of the football team, yet maybe the hardest to put together and keep together year to year with all the changes and players coming and going. Did you kind of echo those sentiments? And it sounds like on your lines, you have a lot of experience as far as Stonehill is concerned. So what are some of your thoughts on that up in the trenches?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, games are always going to be won or lost there, and from an offensive line perspective, I mean, that's the only position in football that doesn't have an individual stat attached to it. Everybody else's success is dependent on theirs. Their success is not dependent on anyone else. So I think you have to have a great culture, not only in your program, but in that room in particular. You have to do a great job of recruiting and developing guys at this level inside. You're not going to build out your offensive and defensive line through the transfer portal. You have to be able to recruit and develop those guys. So, somebody like Josh Troiano, who's been in our program for 4 years and has been a 3-year starter, those are the type of guys that you want to have in the program. And, we have, Latana Onyekaba, who's our starting right tackle. He's going to be a senior. He's been in the program for 4 years. He's a 2-year starter. Pete Fiamara, who's a junior but a 3-year starter, will be a 3-year starter at the guard position. So we do have a lot of experience coming back there, and I think what those guys have done the best at is they're awesome in the weight room, they're awesome in the practice field, they're awesome in the meeting room. So those are the pieces that go into their development and inevitably our success.
Now, on the defensive side of things, a lot of familiar faces returning, especially in the secondary. 3 fifth-year players in the secondary. How excited are you to kind of see those guys take another step forward in 2026?
Yeah, we have some great talent coming back, but also some great leadership, great people coming back. I think, when you look at, if you want to start in the secondary, like you had mentioned, like we have 3 fifth-year seniors that have played a significant amount of football over the course of their career. Mo Seed, Jordan Irvine, and Johnez Williams have all started multiple games for us, made big plays for us over the course of their career. Some of them have battled some injury, so it's great to be able to get them back, for their 5th year. And obviously, they just set the tone not only for the DB room, but for the defense and for the team. When you have guys that are that invested, that show that, and all 3 of those guys probably would have had opportunities to go elsewhere had they chosen to. And, but they wanted to get their degrees here and stick and, finish what they started here. And I think that just shows how invested they are at Stonehill College and our football team. We have some great talent around them too. We brought in a couple transfers in the portal. We have some guys that have developed really nicely. I think, at the safety position next to Jordan, Eric Miles, Gene Townsell, guys that played for us, last year and 2 years ago. And then, there's a couple of new faces in there too that have really done a great job that have stepped in. DeAndre Goodson, Kendrick Williams, a couple transfers that we've brought in the process. So you're going to see we're fortunate that we should be able to have quite a few different players participating at a high level in the back end. And then you look at the perimeter, with the corners. Obviously, you mentioned Mo and Johnez coming back, but we have Trayvon Baxter, who played a ton for us as a true freshman last year, who's gotten stronger and bigger and faster in the offseason. And then we brought in some 2 transfers, Mohamed Toure from Stetson and Nasir Christmas from UMaine. So all of those guys had awesome springs. They're going to play a lot of football for us. I think we're probably more talented, but we're definitely deeper than we've ever been in the back end. So that's fun. Obviously, it's a challenge to make sure that they're all prepared and we get them a lot of reps. But the secondary is a very deep and experienced room right now for us.
And you mentioned the defense was one of the big parts of last year, most successful parts of last year. So we'll see how they improve going into this year. Let's touch on the schedule, Coach. Some of the highlights for Stonehill this year is that the schedule starts at home on Saturday, the 29th of August against Bryant, but then you don't see your home field again for about 7 weeks. 5 straight road games, a bye mixed in there before hosting Duquesne on the 17th of October. The first conference game is in week 2, the first of 3 consecutive road games is the September 5th against New Haven. 3 of the last 4, though, are at home. Halloween against Mercyhurst, homecoming against Central Connecticut, and then the finale on November 21st against Wagner. So what are your thoughts on, Coach, the schedule and all those miles and hotel points you're going to rack up early on in September and October?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting schedule. I mean, we're glad that we start out at home against a tough CAA opponent in Bryant, who's right down the road from us. But yeah, not being at home, having a home game in the month of September will be interesting. It's our first opportunity to play FBS opponents this year. We play obviously with Ohio and UMass, so we're excited to make those trips and to play up a level and play against some very talented football programs, some MAC schools. So that'll really be our first opportunity to play FBS talent. But some obviously we're playing 3 CAA opponents in Bryant, in Sacred Heart, and in New Hampshire. We have that early one against New Haven, our old NE10 foe. We didn't play them last year in their first year in the NEC, so we'll be returning to the blue turf, which is a familiar place for a lot of us that have been here for a while. But yeah, I think the challenge is to make sure that you you're trying to win every single football game that you roll the ball out there. Obviously, the most important ones are the conference games because our goal every year is to win this conference and try to get into the NCAA playoffs as a result of that. So, you want to play the best competition that you can. And I think we're definitely doing that this year in terms of not only our conference opponents, but obviously our out of conference opponents, like you had mentioned. So it'll be a tough month of September with some great challenges in front of us. But I think our guys are really excited. I think we're playing great talent. We've got a lot in front of us. I think the challenge for us as a program will be to just stay, focused on the process and not worry about who we're playing or where we're playing them. At the end of the day, the field's going to be the same length. The ball's going to be the same size. We just got to go play our brand of football.
Is there any different approach to your August practices and that first game against Bryant, considering that you have a conference game, right? You're not going to be able to ramp up with a couple of non-conference. You have a big conference game, and you said the goal is those conference games. So is there any different approach to how you kind of ramp up in August to get ready to start the season?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think when we went into last year, we made some significant changes to our scheduling model from a practice standpoint in terms of like how we manage the workload throughout the season. We had gotten pretty banged up from an injury standpoint in 2024. So, obviously there's things in that we felt like we could control. Obviously some of that is out of your control. So, we definitely tried to change the model in terms of when we're practicing more physical, when we're trying to lighten the load, when we're trying to be more mental or just focus on speed and kind of getting the guys moving. So that worked out really well for us. So I think, without revealing too much there, I think we will see more of that in the month of August because we have, 12 football games in front of us. So, we want to make sure that we're healthy throughout, that we're peaking every weekend. And that's going to be a big part of it. Obviously the training that our guys are doing right now is going to, pay huge dividends towards that. And then, we have to do a great job as coaches of slowing our guys down, and I'd much rather be in a position where I'm slowing guys down than having to kick them in the butt and get them to go a little faster. So that's a good place to be. And we'll definitely be looking to do that.
Sounds like Stonehill is in a good place right now, Coach. Thank you so much for spending some time joining us this week, and best of luck this season.
I appreciate it, Craig. Thank you.
The Stonehill Skyhawks again open their season against the Bryant Bulldogs Saturday, August 29th, 6 p.m. And if you're in Easton, Massachusetts, make sure you get to the stadium on the 29th because it'll be a while before you get to see them at home again. I'm Craig D'Amico, and this is NEC Football Media Week.